still holding my right arm, and now they had their knee on the back of my neck. I tried to turn over. That didn't work, but my left arm was still free, so I reached behind my back and grabbed hold of a foot. I twisted the foot as hard as I could. There was a scream of pain from my attacker, and I quickly pushed them off my back. Then I dived, grabbing the person from behind. I forced the attacker to stand up with both arms held behind them. The attacker suddenly started kicking my legs. "Stand still or I'll really hurt you," I said. "Oh, yes," a voice said behind me. It was a woman's voice. Then 2 fists hit me, low down on my back. The pain was terrible. Next, someone's fingers stabbed at the base of my neck, just above my shoulders. I let go of the person I was holding and turned as quickly as I could. I turned just in time to receive a kick to the head. I spun around and fell heavily to the floor. Then I knew nothing. When I woke up, I was still lying on the floor. A woman was sitting on my chest, holding me down. Another woman was sitting on my legs. "Let me get up," I said. "I can explain why I'm here." "Josie's just been injured, and you're here looking into Gail's dressing room window," the woman on my chest said. She had shiny dark hair and was wearing a suit. "And you haven't got a pass," she went on. "You'll stay where you are until someone from security comes." I lay on the floor for what seemed to be a long time. Then I heard footsteps. "So, you think you've caught him?" a voice said. I knew that voice. It was Rick. The woman got off me. "There he is," said the dark-haired woman. "Take him away." I looked up at Rick. "Sorry, Rick," I said. "I got lost. And then," I pointed at the 2 women, "these animals attacked me." "Fine," Rick said. "Let me introduce you to Annie and Arabella, Miss Lane's bodyguards." He pointed at the woman in turn. "I told you they were good." Annie was the one with dark hair. Arabella had red hair, and she was wearing a suit like Annie's. "And who is he?" Arabella asked angrily. "His name is Lenny Samuel. He's an advisor for Miss Lane," Rick replied. "He's going to advise her on how to behave like a private detective." "Oh, really?" Arabella laughed. "What does he know? We caught him easily enough." "Wait," I interrupted. "What's happened? Gail Lane can't be in 2 places at the same time. If Gail is here in her dressing room, who was that over there on the set?" "The person who had the accident is called Josie. She's not dead, but she's quite badly injured. She was Gail's stunt double, someone who did the most dangerous parts of Gail's acting," Rick explained. "The rope she was attached to broke. It was a terrible accident." "Or a warning," I said. I stood up slowly. My back and neck hurt. I shook hands with Annie and Arabella. "I can see that Miss Lane is well protected," I added. "Yeah, when she wants to be," Arabella replied angrily. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Sometimes she goes out at night without us," Annie said. "We can't protect her then." She was angry too. "Perhaps after this accident she'll be more careful," I said. "I'd like to introduce Mr. Samuel to Miss Lane," Rick said. "But perhaps this isn't a good time." "Gail's very upset about Josie's accident," Annie said. "But I'll ask her if she'll meet Mr. Samuel for a few minutes. I guess there won't be any more shooting today." Annie went into the dressing room and closed the door behind her. We waited outside in silence. Then the door opened. "Miss Lane will meet Mr. Samuel for a few minutes. She can't talk for long. She doesn't feel well," Annie said. I followed Annie into the dressing room. Gail was sitting at a table, holding a handkerchief. She looked up, and those green eyes were full of worry. She held out her hand. "I'm pleased to meet you," she said in a low voice. "I'm sorry. I'm very upset. Josie was a friend as well as my double." "Mr. Samuel will be advising you on how private detectives behave," Rick explained. Arabella laughed quietly. Gail looked at me more closely. I could feel her beautiful eyes staring at me. "Haven't we met before?" she asked. I thought for a moment. Arabella and Annie got angry when Gail went out without them. When she went out with Mike Devine, for example. "No, Miss Lane," I replied. Chapter 7. From L.A. to B.A. Rick and I left Gail Lane's dressing room and walked back to the set where the accident had happened. The police had arrived and were taking statements from everyone. Rick and I told them what we had seen. The area around the huge screen was closed off with yellow tape, and a number of detectives were carefully searching the floor there. A gray-haired lieutenant from the LAPD, a man called Dickinson, had taken charge. I had met him before. I asked him what he thought had happened.
"I don't know yet. It's hard to say," Dickinson replied. "The rope was checked before shooting started, and it was okay then. So why did it break?"
"Someone must have made a cut in the rope to make it break easily," I said.
Dickinson said. "You might be right. If you have any other ideas, call me. You know where to find me."
Rick had to stay in the studio while the police detectives were making their investigation. I waited with him. I'm used to waiting and watching, and there was plenty to watch on the movie set. 2 hours later, the police had gone, and Rick and I were sitting in his smart office. "We'll have to shoot here for an extra day because of Josie's accident," Rick told me. "Then the whole crew is moving to Argentina, to Buenos Aires. I want you to come along." Rick was interrupted by one of his phones ringing. He answered it. "Yes, I see," he said. "I will. Yes, sir. I will. I've got a new man here now." He put the phone down. "That was Mr. Frank. He's had another email. The message said, 'This time we got the double. Next time it will be the star.' Mr. Frank is very worried." "So it wasn't an accident," I said softly. "And you told me it was a closed set with no visitors allowed. So the person who cut the rope was probably someone working on the movie." Rick nodded. "Yes, or someone who had hidden in the studio before shooting started. We just don't know," he said. "That's why I want you to join us in Buenos Aires. I want you on the set all the time. Gail has Arabella and Annie with her whenever she isn't acting, but I want you to watch out for anything suspicious." "How many people are there in the movie crew?" I asked. "There'll be 205 of us flying to Buenos Aires," Rick replied, "and probably about 200 Argentines will join us in BA. You need a lot of people to make a movie." "And you want me to keep an eye on all of them?" I exclaimed. Rick smiled. "I'm sure you'll find out who's been threatening Gail," he said. "I know you, Len. You're always in trouble. Just stay with the crew and the trouble will find you." 2 days later, I was flying at 10,000 meters over Brazil on my way to Buenos Aires. I sat back in the comfortable seat of the Aerolíneas Argentinas Boeing 747, and I thought about what had happened during the past few days. What was the relationship between Gail and Mike Devine? Why did someone want to stop the shooting of Death Behind the Door? Why was someone threatening to kill Gail? Who had injured Josie, Gail's double? And was he, or she, on the plane with us? There were plenty of questions, but no answers. I looked at Rick asleep in the next seat. There was certainly something he hadn't told me. I thought about Gail sitting in the first-class section at the front of the plane. I thought about the worry I had seen in her eyes at the studio. Then I thought about Carla Chapman. She was also in the first-class section. I had met her briefly at the airport before we got onto the plane. Carla was one of Hollywood's best-known movie directors, a powerful and very hard-working person. She was a strong, proud 45-year-old with shoulder-length black hair and gold-framed glasses. At the airport, she had shaken my hand firmly, and she had said it was nice to meet me. Then she had told me to keep out of the way during shooting. After that, she had wrapped her long black coat around her and walked away. I hadn't yet seen Brent Foster, Gale's co-star in the movie. He was being flown to Argentina in his own private jet. I hadn't met him, but I felt that I knew him because I had seen so many of his movies. He always played bad guys, but he always got the girls. He looked a little like me, but he was younger and heavier, and he had blonde hair and blue eyes. I was looking forward to meeting Brent. After a while, I stopped thinking about my job, and I looked out of the window at the clouds. I wanted to help Gale, but I had to wait for something new to happen. It was mid-morning when the 747 landed at Ezeiza International Airport outside Buenos Aires. There was mist in the air, and the weather was cool. It took several hours to get all the baggage and equipment through customs. At last, it was done, and we got into buses for the long journey to the city center. Most of the movie crew were going to stay at the Bizanti Palace Hotel. In fact, we had booked all the rooms in the hotel. But Gale, Carla, Brent, and a few others were going to be at the luxurious Alvear Palace Hotel near the Recoleta Cemetery, where we would be shooting. There was no work till the next day, so after we had checked in at the hotel, I lay on my bed and fell asleep. When I woke, it was early evening, and it was dark. I had a shower, and then I went out for a walk. I was going to meet Rick and some of the members of the crew for dinner at 10 o'clock, an early time for dinner in BA. I walked slowly through the streets, smelling the diesel smoke from the brightly painted Colectivo buses. The streets were full of people. Young people were walking hand in hand, and large families were talking together on the sidewalks. Everyone seemed happy. I began to like BA very much. I soon arrived at Corrientes, a long, wide street full of movie theaters, restaurants, and cafes. I stopped at a place called Café Pernambuco and went in. Inside were groups of students talking excitedly, elderly men reading newspapers, and smartly dressed women eating cakes. I ordered a coffee and sat back to enjoy the scene. After a while, I noticed a younger woman sitting by a window. She was dressed in black, with a black scarf over her head. Her head was turned away from me, so I couldn't see her face. She looked at her watch again and again, and she looked up every time the cafe door opened. I ordered another coffee and picked up a newspaper from a nearby table. From behind the newspaper, I could watch the woman in black without her seeing me. Suddenly, she turned her head towards me and called to the waiter. I saw the woman's face. It was Gale Lane. I looked around the cafe. Where were Annie and Arabella, her bodyguards? Then I remembered Annie's words. Sometimes she goes out at night without us. Gale was alone. Who was she waiting for? Chapter 8. Café Pernambuco. Gale spoke to the waiter. He smiled, and a few moments later he returned with a cup of hot chocolate and a glass of water. I watched Gale for half an hour, drinking my coffee slowly. Nobody joined her. I asked the waiter for some orange juice. Too much coffee is bad for me, and I went on watching. After another hour and 2 more orange juices, I had to go to the men's washroom. When I came back, Gale was paying the waiter. She was about to leave. Had someone come in and spoken to her, or had she got tired of waiting? I made a quick decision. As Gail was standing up, I walked across the room as if I had just come in through the door. I walked up behind Gail and said in a quiet voice, "Excuse me, Miss Lane. May I speak to you?" Gail looked very frightened, and she held on to the chair. Then she sat down. I pulled out another chair. I sat down and looked at Gail. Her hands were white, and they were shaking. "So it was you," she whispered. "You!" "What was me?" I asked. "It was you who sent the message," Gail whispered. "Well, I'm here. What do you want?" "Miss Lane, believe me, I didn't send you a message. I'm here by chance," I said, looking into those beautiful green eyes. "You're not who you say you are," she said. "You arrived at the studios on the day of Josie's accident. But I've seen you before. I know that." "You're right, Miss Lane," I replied. "We have met before. In the street outside the Purple Palace in L.A. It was the night when Mike Devine crashed his car into mine. The night I took him home." Gail smiled for the first time. "So that's who you are," she said quickly. "You helped me then and—" She stopped speaking. "And I'll help you now," I said, finishing her sentence. "I'm working for the studio, and they've told me to do everything I can to help you. So here I am." "What can I do?" Gail smiled again. Then she looked sad. "There's nothing you can do. There's nothing anyone can do." "Tell me your problem," I said. "What about the message you mentioned? What was the message?" Gail opened her handbag, pulled out an envelope, and gave it to me. Inside it was a piece of Alvear Palace Hotel notepaper. I read the message. "If you want to have the photos, go to Café Pernambuco, Avenida Corrientes at 7 p.m. Sit at a table by the window." I put the note back into the envelope. "What photos are those, Miss Lane?" I asked quietly. "And what is so important about those photos? What makes you come to a cafe you don't know to meet a person you don't know?" Gail looked down at the table. She started. "I can't tell you," she said. "You wouldn't believe me, Mr. Samuel." "Tell me," I said, with what I hoped was a friendly smile. Gail took a deep breath. "You must keep this to yourself. Don't tell anyone," she began. "I'm being blackmailed. Years ago, when I was much younger, when I was just starting to act, I was friends with a man. You need friends when you're a young actress. This man helped me to meet people who worked in the movies. It was all quite innocent. We were just friends. We'd go out for a meal or to see a show. Sometimes we'd go dancing in a club." "And the photos are of you and this man?" I interrupted. "Yes, I believe so," Gail replied. "They're pictures of us dancing together at a club." I thought for a moment. "And the name of this man? Is he someone important?" I asked. Gail laughed. "Important? No. Dangerous? Yes. I didn't know that when I met him. I thought he was a businessman. I didn't know he was a gangster and a murderer. I thought he was just a kind person who was helping me to start working in the movies." "And his name?" I asked again. "He's changed his name since I first knew him," she replied. "Vincenzo Calabresi was his name then. Vincent Caleb is what he calls himself now. And now he'll kill anyone who doesn't do what he tells them. He's a madman, Mr. Samuel." This was very bad news. Vincent Caleb was a well-known gangster. He was a ruthless criminal, and he had a gang of ruthless men to carry out his commands. "So the message was from Vincent," I said. "No," Gail replied. "I've had similar messages before. This is from someone who's somehow got some photos of Vincent and me. The last message said that unless I pay $250,000, the photos would be sent to the newspapers. Mr. Samuel, if those photos are printed in the newspapers, my career will be finished. If these messages aren't from Caleb, have you any idea who is blackmailing you? I asked. I wondered if it was someone working on the movie, but I didn't say so. Gail shook her head. She picked up the envelope and opened her handbag. As she opened the bag, I saw a small gun inside it. I have to go, Gail said. I don't think anyone is going to come. No, perhaps they just watched you this time, to see if you obeyed their instructions, I said. I'll walk with you to the Alvear Palace. Downtown Buenos Aires is a safe place, but you're a star, and someone might recognize you. Don't worry about me, Gail said. I've got something here to protect me. She touched her handbag. If you're thinking of taking that gun onto the movie set tomorrow, I said, forget about it. The security will be very tight here in BA. Then you take it, Gail said with a smile, and give it to me tomorrow when we're on the set. Okay, I replied, but let me walk back to the hotel with you now. Gail nodded. I paid the waiter for my coffee and orange juice. Then we walked out into the evening air. It was quite a long walk back to Gail's hotel. We didn't talk a lot, but it was a peaceful, friendly time which both of us enjoyed. Outside the hotel, I said goodbye. I put Gail's gun into my pocket, and I called for a cab to take me back to the Bisonti Palace. As the cab drove through the busy streets, I was a happy man. Just before going into the hotel, Gail had kissed me on the cheek. Chapter 9. Recoleta. We start shooting tomorrow at 9 at the Recoleta Cemetery, Rick said to me quietly during dinner. I've hired a very good Argentine security company to search everyone who's working on location. I want you to stand with the security guys at the cemetery entrance, Len. You'll soon be able to recognize everyone. So the next morning at 7:30, I was standing at the entrance to the Recoleta Cemetery on Calle Junin, opposite Plaza Alvear. The Recoleta district is one of the richest and smartest in Buenos Aires, and the richest people in BA are buried in the graves in the cemetery. We were going to shoot a scene in the cemetery, a scene in which Gail, as a private detective, had a meeting with an international criminal, Brent. That morning, Calle Junin was closed to traffic. Trucks full of movie equipment, buses for the extras, mobile dressing rooms for the stars, and catering trucks were all parked in the Calle Junin. Electric cables joined the lights and the other equipment to powerful generators outside the cemetery. Standing next to me was a man called José Luis from the Argentine Security Company. His men and women were searching everyone as they arrived. In my jacket pocket was Gail's gun in a mailing envelope. Fortunately, no one had decided to search me. Gail and Brent Foster came from their mobile dressing rooms and stood at the cemetery entrance. Gail was looking worried. As soon as she had been searched, I gave her the mailing envelope. "Excuse me, Miss Lane," I said. "This package is for you." Gail took the package and smiled at me for a moment. Then she walked into the cemetery. By 9 o'clock, Carla was ready to begin shooting. Huge lights lit up the front of one of the biggest tombs in the cemetery. The tomb was built of white stone, and it was the size of a small house. The front of the roof was decorated with life-size white statues. 2 cameras were going to shoot the scene. One camera was lifted up in the air on a crane. Another was on metal rails laid on the ground. When she edited the scene back at the studios, Carla would edit together shots from the 2 cameras. Carla sat in a big folding chair with Director written on the back. When everybody was ready, she shouted, "Cameras! Action!" Brent Foster, wearing a white raincoat, walked along a path towards the camera on rails. Then he stopped by the front of the tomb. After a moment, Gail came running up to Brent. "Cut!" Carla shouted. "Brent, I want you to look a bit more nervous. Gail, that was great, but I'd like you to look a little more excited, please." They repeated the scene 7 times before Carla was satisfied. Then we all stopped for coffee. The makeup artists repaired Brent and Gail's makeup. The cameras moved to new positions. Soon another scene was being shot in front of the tomb. This time it was a conversation between Brent and Gail. I wasn't really bored, but there wasn't anything for me to do. Annie and Arabella were there to look after Gail, so I decided to take a walk around the cemetery. The tombs were magnificent. There were many styles of architecture, but all the tombs showed the wealth of the people buried in them. I must have been walking around for half an hour before I decided it was time to go back and check on the shooting. I went towards the tomb where the movie crew was working. I was thinking about Gail and the messages she had received when I saw someone dressed in black lying on the ground beside the back wall of the tomb. I ran quickly to see who it was. It was Annie. Her hands were tied behind her back, and there was tape across her eyes and mouth. I looked around carefully. I felt that someone was watching me, but I couldn't see anyone. I walked very quietly along the side of the tomb towards the front. At that moment, something made me look up at the roof. Was someone hiding there? All I could see was the line of white stone statues. Statues holding flowers. Statues holding plants. Statues holding books. Statues holding huge stone balls. Then one of the statues with a stone ball moved. Was I dreaming? No, the statue took a step forward towards the front edge of the roof and then stood still again. I ran around to the front of the tomb as fast as I could. Gail and Brent were still standing there in the bright lights of the set. I looked up and saw the statue right above them. The heavy stone ball was now raised above its head. I dived forward, pushing Brent out of the way and throwing Gail to the ground. "Cut!" shouted Carla. Crash! The heavy stone ball hit the ground just where the 2 stars had been standing. At that moment, Arabella jumped on top of me. "Stay away from Miss Lane!" she shouted as she pulled me away from Gail. "What do you think you're doing?" Carla shouted at me. "There's no time to explain," I replied, running around to the back of the tomb, closely followed by Arabella. But we were too late. The statue had gone. Arabella untied Annie and took the tape off her face. "What happened?" Arabella asked. "Someone jumped at me from behind," Annie muttered angrily. "I don't know who it was." "Was it him?" Arabella asked, pointing at me. "I don't know," Annie replied. "It could have been." We walked back to the set. I explained to Carla what had happened. Gail and Brent were okay. Gail was laughing nervously, and Brent looked a bit shocked. Then I found Rick and told him what had happened. "I knew trouble would find you, Len," Rick said with a smile. "I was right." "No," I replied. "I was just lucky. I'm pleased that I was able to save Gail, but it was only luck. Why don't you call the police?" Rick looked away from me. "No, Len," he said quickly. "We don't want to involve the police. We have to go on to Istanbul in 3 days' time. We can't change the schedule. We can't wait for an investigation." "Okay, but there's another thing," I said. "I meant to be advising Gail on how private detectives behave. I haven't had a chance to speak to her about that yet." "Making you her advisor was just a way to get you onto the set," Rick answered. "Still, I suppose you're right. Gail and Brent are going to a tango show tonight with Carla and me. Why don't you come along with us? You can talk to Gail there." Okay, I said. And one more thing. I need some transport of my own. This is a big city, and I need to be mobile if I'm going to protect Gale. Rick thought for a moment. We can hire a car for you, he said. A motorbike would be better, I replied. It will be much quicker in heavy traffic. I'll see what I can do, Rick said. I spent the afternoon on the movie set. I watched Brent and Gale acting the same scene again and again. Movie schedules are made up of short periods of hard work, followed by hours of standing and waiting. But no one tried to kill Gale. No one tried to sell her any photographs. Gale didn't need the gun. Arabella and Annie didn't attack me. No statues moved. I was bored. When shooting ended for the day, Gale came over to me. I've got to talk to you, she said, looking around to see if anyone was listening. Not here, I said. There are too many people here. How about tonight at the tango show? She stared at me. How did you know about that? Our visit to the tango show was meant to be a secret. I laughed. I'm a detective, I said. Chapter 10. Tango. Just before 10 o'clock that night, I was sitting on a shiny Harley-Davidson motorbike parked by the sidewalk opposite the Alvear Palace Hotel. Rick had hired this stunning machine for me to use while we were in BA. To match the Harley-Davidson, I was wearing a black suit with a blue tie and a white silk scarf and a blue crash helmet. I watched the doors of the hotel carefully. At 10 o'clock, Carla and Brent came out. A few moments later, they were followed by Gale, who was wearing a long green dress. The three of them stood together on the sidewalk. Suddenly, a black limousine stopped beside them, and I saw Rick in the front of the car, next to the driver. Carla, Brent, and Gale got into the back of the limo, which drove off down Avenida Alvear. I waited until it was 100 meters ahead of me. Then I moved the Harley-Davidson out into the traffic behind it. After a short time, the limo turned onto the wide street called Avenida 9 de Julio, driving towards the La Boca district. I followed, but I stayed 100 meters behind it. From that position, I soon noticed a red Ford, which was driving about 60 meters behind the limo. It's just a coincidence, I thought. But when we left the Avenida 9 de Julio and started to travel through much smaller streets, the red Ford stayed in the same position. By the time we reached the narrow alleys of the La Boca district, it was obvious that the Ford was either following the limo or that the people in it were going to the same tango show. The limo stopped in a dark street, outside what looked like a large private house. The 4 passengers got out of the car and went into the house. The limo drove away. I slowed down and watched the red Ford. It parked 50 meters away from the large house, and 2 young men got out. They were wearing smart suits, and they had short hair. They walked quickly along the street and went into the house. I locked the motorbike and walked up to the red Ford. There was a copy of the Buenos Aires Herald on the back seat. That's interesting, I thought. An English-language newspaper. Perhaps the men are just tourists. I went into the house. A waiter led me into a restaurant with long tables and a stage at one end. I joined Rick, Carla, and the movie stars at one of the tables. For a couple of hours we ate. It was an excellent meal. And then, at midnight, the dancing started. The show was great. It was loud, exciting, and very lively, but there was something sad about the music. After an hour, I had discovered that at an Argentine tango show, you only watch the performance. You don't have to dance yourself. I was pleased about that. But I was sitting next to Gale, who wasn't pleased about it. I want to dance too, she said. You can't, I replied. These are professional dancers who've spent their lives dancing the tango. They don't want an American amateur joining in. I'll show you, Gale said, standing up quickly. A dance was just finishing. and before I could stop her, Gail had jumped up onto the stage. I called one of the male dancers over to our table, and I spoke to him briefly in Spanish. He nodded and smiled. Then he went back to the stage, and when the music began again, he started to dance with Gail. She was fantastic. Gail danced the tango as if she had been born in Buenos Aires. We watched her in great surprise. So did the two young men in suits who were sitting at another table. At the end of the dance, the other dancers applauded Gail while she walked back to our table. When she sat down, her face was bright with excitement. "I'm an American amateur, am I, mister?" she said. "And what did you say to that dancer?" I thought for a moment. Then I told a lie. I wanted Gail to be happy. "I said that you were a famous American dancer," I replied. "I said that he would enjoy dancing with you." In fact, I told him that Gail couldn't dance the tango, but that it was her birthday and she wanted to celebrate. Soon Brent, Carla, and Rick went to the bar. Gail and I were alone. "You said you wanted to talk to me, Gail," I said quietly. "I suppose I should thank you for saving my life at the cemetery," Gail said. "Everything happened so quickly this morning. If you hadn't been there, that stone ball would have killed me." I nodded. "Perhaps." "You were very brave," I said. "Have you had any more messages?" Gail shook her head. "No," she said. "Do you think that the person who has the photos is trying to kill me?" "I don't know," I replied. "But I don't think so. Whoever has the photos, he wants you alive so that you can pay for them. But whoever dropped the stone, he wanted you dead." Gail opened her handbag. "Here's the gun," she said, giving me the package. "Will you bring it onto the set for me again tomorrow? I feel much safer with it." "Okay," I said, and I quickly put the envelope in my pocket as I saw Brent, Carla, and Rick returning to our table.
"Are you having fun?"
Rick asked. "Sure," I answered. "We're just talking about being a private eye." "I don't believe you're a detective at all," Gail said with a sudden smile. "Prove it." "Right," I said. "Do you see that table in the corner by the door?" "The table with two men in dark suits sitting at it," Gail replied. "Yes, that's it," I said. "Those two men followed you here. I'm going outside now. When I've gone, you go over to their table and ask them why they were following you. I think that will make them leave, and then I'll follow them. I'll find out who they are." "Okay," Gail said. "Let's try it." I left the tango show, and I went and sat on the Harley-Davidson. I put the gun into one of the motorbike's big carriers. My guess was right. 2 minutes later, the men in suits came hurrying out of the house and got into the red Ford. The engine started at once, and they drove off as fast as they could along the narrow streets. I followed them carefully. Soon we were out on the straight, wide Avenida 9 de Julio again, and I had to stay closer to the Ford so that I didn't lose it in the traffic. The Ford increased its speed, and so did I. They've seen me, I thought. Soon we were both traveling at over 120 kilometers per hour. It was nearly 2 o'clock, but there was still a lot of traffic on the streets. The red Ford moved easily between the slower cars. The driver was very clever. He was very clever, but it was easy for me to follow the Ford on the big motorbike. I got behind the Ford for a moment, but it accelerated again. It went through a red traffic light, and I followed it. So did a police car. A few moments later, I heard the sound of the police car's siren behind me. Then I saw the flashing light as the police car came alongside me. A policeman in the front of the car shouted at me to stop. So I slowed down and stopped. The red Ford drove on at high speed down the wide avenue. "¿Qué pasa?" a tall policeman asked me as we stood by the side of the road. He told me to get off the motorbike and get into the back of the police car. There was another policeman in the car. He asked me in Spanish for some identification. I gave him my passport. He looked at it for a minute. When he spoke again, he spoke in English. "So," the policeman said, as he handed my passport back to me, "you are a visitor to this country, but you think you can break all the traffic laws? Speeding? Dangerous driving? Going through red traffic lights?" "I can explain, officer," I began. "My name is Garcia. Captain Roberto Garcia," the policeman said. "Captain Garcia," I began again, "I can explain." I told the policeman about my job, about the movie, about Gale, and about the 2 men in the red Ford. "Yes, we saw the men in the red Ford," the captain said. "And why did you stop me and not them?" I asked. Captain Garcia smiled and shook his head. "I couldn't stop the car you were following. It had diplomatic license plates," he said. "Diplomatic plates? Which embassy did the car belong to?" I asked, although I was sure I already knew the answer. "The United States of America, senor," Captain Garcia replied. Chapter 11. Misunderstandings and Messages. I sat in the back of the police car on the Avenida 9 de Julio and waited for Captain Garcia to charge me. I waited for him to charge me with speeding, dangerous driving, and going through red traffic lights. But he didn't charge me. Instead, he took out a notebook and wrote something in it. Then he tore out the page he'd written on. "I believe your story," the captain said, "but you must obey our traffic laws. I'm not going to charge you this time, but if we catch you riding your motorbike dangerously again, you'll be in serious trouble." I nodded. "And one more thing," the captain said with a smile. "Here's my phone number." He passed me the piece of paper from his notebook. "If I can help you in any way, call me." "Muchas gracias," I said. I got out of the police car and onto the motorbike. As I rode away, very slowly, on the Harley-Davidson, I thought that I had been very lucky. What would the captain have done if he had searched the motorbike and had found Gale's gun? At 7:30 the next morning, I was back at the Recoleta Cemetery. I was standing by the gate with the Argentine security chief, watching everyone being searched. I had already seen Rick and told him about the chase the night before and about my meeting with the Buenos Aires police. I didn't tell him about the gun. A line of technicians and actors was waiting to be searched. It was quite cold, and the people in the line were becoming impatient. Because of the problem of the day before, all the security guards were very careful, and the search was taking a long time. I saw Annie and Arabella near the front of the line, and I waved to them. I was trying to be friendly. "Why aren't you being searched?" Arabella shouted to me. I smiled and shook my head, but when it was Arabella's turn to be searched, she refused. There was an argument with one of the Argentine security guards. Minutes went by, and the other people in the line were becoming more and more impatient. The security guard called for help on his radio, and Rick came running across to the gate. "Hey, what's all this?" Rick asked Arabella. "You know the rules. Everyone's got to be searched." "I know that," Arabella replied. "I don't mind being searched, but only after they've searched this guy." She pointed at me. "He hasn't been searched. He's just standing and watching." Now everyone was looking at me. I called to Rick, and he came to speak to me. "There's something I've got to tell you, Rick," I said very quietly. "Not now, Len," Rick replied. "Get over to the front of the line and let them search you.